President Trump is still scrambling to walk back his comments about white supremacists that's caused even some Republicans to have to distance themselves. The president is headed to his New Jersey golf club to meet with donors, while his Democratic opponent, Joe Biden, is at home in Wilmington, Delaware. During the debate, when asked to disavow white supremacists, President Trump did not condemn a far-right extremist group called the Proud Boys. And his comments were in fact celebrated by the group that he was asked to oppose. CBS News White House correspondent Paula Reed has the latest on the controversy.
I held Joe Biden accountable for his 47 years of lies, 47 years of betrayal, and 47 years of failure.
President Trump continued to slam his Democratic rival, former Vice President Joe Biden, as he campaigned in Minnesota Wednesday night.
You know, Biden lost badly when his supporters are saying he should cancel the rest of the debates.
But as he left the White House earlier in the day, the president tried to clean up his much criticized comment on white supremacy and the group Proud Boys during the first presidential debate.
They're going to stand down. They have to stand down. Everybody. They have to stand, whatever group you're talking about, let law enforcement do the work.
It was a step further than he had gone on Tuesday when asked to denounce white supremacist groups.
White supremacists and white supremacists and Proud Boys.
Stand back and stand by.
Many Republican lawmakers felt stand back and stand by was inadequate.
Should the president have more forcefully denounced white supremacists?
Yes.
He should have been very clear.
The president claimed he didn't know the group.
I don't know who the Proud Boys are.
But the Proud Boys embraced his comments as a call to arms.
I've always denounced any form of any of that you have to denounce.
President Trump has repeatedly refused to denounce far-right extremism, which the FBI says is one of the most serious threats facing the nation. He said this after white supremacist groups descended on Charlottesville in 2017.
I think there's blame on both sides. You look at both sides. I think there's blame on both sides.
I think it was just a national embarrassment.
On a train tour across Ohio and Pennsylvania, Democratic candidate Joe Biden seized on the comments.
I'll just tell them to stand down, but stand by. Go online. The Proud Boys now have a logo saying, stand down, but stand by. We need to remember who in God's name we are. This is the United States of America.
Paula Reed, CBS News.
And I want to bring in CBSN political reporter Caitlin Huey-Burns to dig deeper into this. She joins me now from outside of Ford Field in Detroit. Hey there, Caitlin. Joe Biden is going to head to Grand Rapids, Michigan, after he spent yesterday on a train tour through Pennsylvania and Ohio. Why is he emphasizing the Midwest right now, and how are voters there responding to his methods of campaigning?
Yeah, we're just about 30 days away from the big election day, and all eyes are on the Midwest. Here in Michigan, the former vice president will be on the other side of the state in Grand Rapids tomorrow. The idea behind that is trying to compete for voters who supported Donald Trump. Michigan obviously is a key battleground, one of three big battleground states that had been traditionally Democratic, switched in 2016 to support Donald Trump. Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, these three states are where the margins can really matter here. So the play by the Biden team over the past couple of days with his visit tomorrow and with that train tour in Ohio and Pennsylvania is really to try to win back some of those voters and try to appeal to voters who may be turned off by the president's rhetoric and behavior, especially at the debate last night or earlier this week.
And Caitlin, you spoke with Reverend Charles Williams. He's a pastor at Detroit's King Solomon Baptist Church and a major figure in the city's Black community working to increase voter turnout. You asked him about Biden's efforts in the Midwest. Let's play for our viewers his response.
I'm hopeful for the Joe Biden campaign, and I'd like to see nothing more than on Election Day we change administrations. But I'm worried at this very same time that we're just not making the contact that we should be making in communities like Detroit, Philadelphia, and Milwaukee.
Not making the contact. So, Caitlin, what more does he want to see from the Biden campaign in these final days leading up to the election?
We had a really interesting conversation with him this morning, and we wanted to talk to him because back in 2016, he was kind of sounding the alarm bells that the Democratic campaigns weren't spending time in the places that they needed to actually talk to voters. And we've seen this kind of debate within the Democratic Party over the past 4 years about how do you win back the Midwest? Do you do it by trying to appeal to those who voted for Obama in 2008 and 2012 and then supported Donald Trump in 2016, or do you try to ramp up your own base of support that didn't turn out in 2016? And what the Reverend was telling us is that the Biden campaign needs to do a better job speaking to African American voters in places like Detroit, in places like Wayne County, where that kind of margin, turnout among black voters, really could make all the difference here. And he also urged them to really be where the voters are, not just holding campaign events, kind of generic campaign events, but actually going to communities like where we were in Detroit today, talking to people about the pandemic and coronavirus and the economic struggles that they are feeling. He said he would suggest coming down around his church, for example, and participating in a food bank, participating in handing out masks to people, just showing people that they're there, that you're there, and talking to issues that they care about. Another really interesting thing that he told us is that it's not enough to just have an anti-Trump message, that you have to make an affirmative case for the Biden ticket. He said that is something that could motivate especially African American voters to turn out. They know that they don't like Donald Trump, he said, but they need to know what they're voting for, not just what they're voting against.
Very interesting, Caitlin, that point about needing to be present, because certainly that was one of the criticisms of the Clinton campaign in 2016. And now, because of the pandemic, Biden has largely been at home or doing virtual events rather than pressing the flesh. As a Midwesterner myself, I think that there's a lot that Republicans and Democrats get wrong about Midwestern voters. In this case, the Reverend talked to you also about what he believed that Democrats are misunderstanding about the Midwest. Can you tell us about that?
That's absolutely right. He essentially said, look, the Midwest is not just white voters. We have to stop thinking about it that way, that you have to really appeal to not only African American voters in Detroit, but also the suburbs that have been changing as well. He suggested that Democrats can't just come to the Midwest and try to appeal to Trump voters. He said that they need to come here and speak to people who would be inclined to vote for a Democrat, but they just haven't seen that affirmative case for the ticket. So kind of getting the party to re-envision what the Midwest really is and means and what people here want to hear.
There are still reverberations from the debate, and you talked about President Trump's comments where he told his supporters to go out and monitor the polls. I want to play the Reverend's response to that.
It's absolutely a real threat. Look, since 2004, Republicans have been producing reports that show when Democrat votes are down in black areas like Detroit, like Philadelphia, like Milwaukee, that they can swing states like Michigan, like Pennsylvania, and like Wisconsin. These three states are just three of the key states that can turn the tide in the election when it comes to the Electoral College.
So the president's comments telling his supporters to go watch at the polls, even though they're not poll workers and not given any particular designation, might seem innocuous to some folks. But for people in communities of color that have historically seen voter suppression exercised at the polls, those comments had a different resonance. Talk to us a little bit more about how he intends to increase voter turnout despite what he was saying was this intimidation.
That's exactly right. And he was saying that he took those comments to be a real threat and thinks that his community will take it the same way. a really interesting point that the Reverend was making to us about access to the vote. And you know that we've been reporting on voting rights and voter suppression and barriers to people actually voting. He said that we have this focus, of course, on mail-in voting and absentee voting, which is really critical to provide some sort of option to people who don't feel comfortable showing up in person at the polls. But what he was telling us, the Reverend was telling us, that people in his community often change addresses. They might not be registered voters, that just getting a ballot is not something that is going to necessarily work for them. He mentioned that people are used to just getting bills in the mail, so they may not check their mail or may not be excited to get anything in the mail in that way. So what he's been encouraging people to do is to actually try to show up in person. And again, that's something that the campaigns need to be messaging to people about what their options are and not just relying on absentee ballots. While he said that that can be a good thing, it can also represent some disparities in the system, and it may not be the exact right way to provide access to people.
All right, Caitlin Huey-Burns, thank you.